brands. Please welcome Freddie Liversidge.
Perfect. All right. I noticed that I stood at a podium before. I usually get to walk around, so this will be fun. Yeah. So we're going to talk about an inconvenient truth. We jumped in. Where's the clicker? Here we go. Don't worry. We're not going to talk about global warming. I'm not any expert on that. We'll leave that to the professionals, maybe some of those people in Washington, D.C. But we are going to talk about an inconvenient truth around data. And Steve lined it up beautifully, talking about some of the pieces and changes we've seen over the last few years. So we all had a vision, right? We had this vision of programmatic media. Right time, right place, right everything, right? We could get it perfectly landed on the right individual. I like this cartoon. It makes me smile. I do think we got pretty creepy with our chasing people with shoes and things like that, right, around. I always talk about I got married right before the pandemic, and I still had wedding content for the next year afterwards chasing me around the internet, which is brilliant because I was the worst person to target anyway because my wife did everything, right? I wasn't going to be buying anything for that wedding. And if we did, it wouldn't have gone very well. But this was the vision. And at HP, we went so deep into this vision. I've been talking to a few people, to the point where we've actually shut down pretty much all our linear TV, right? We don't spend a penny on it. We got so excited about targeting the right person in the right moment, and to the point where I actually think it was detrimental to our business. And so we started to try and pull back, and this data set I'm going to walk you through was one of the reasons we have started to pull back. We are not as far as I'd like to be, but we are moving backwards. Should I say backwards? I probably should say forwards, right? We're moving in a better direction. But before I kind of talk about that, I was talking about this with the team recently because we keep talking about cookies and the death of the cookie, and I love it. We're working from home. My wife gets to enjoy listening to my conversations as we sit in the same office. And she goes, Freddie, why do you always talk about cookies? It's the most boring conversation I've ever heard. And so it's really interesting when you have to look at this. And I've been talking to my team a lot about this. We are still leaning on cookies, and we're still focused on them. And I look at this data set that sits behind me. This is data from a DSP. It's Viant. And this is, when you look at the bid stream, the actual data that still has a cookie attached to it. It is the data that it's got a cookie attached to Connect TV. That's kind of obvious. It's the data that's connected to a Made. It is deprecating very quickly, and especially for someone like an HP. Apple's a big competitor for us, right? As you would guess, and we're not talking to anybody on Apple because we're using cookies from an iOS perspective. And so we're seeing this happen. We're seeing all this data starting to disappear, and we're still doing an audience-based approach, and it started having us thinking, and then we did some testing around third-party data, and I'm sorry if anybody works for third-party data companies, but we started doing a bunch of testing on third-party data, and I remember doing some demographic testing, and we did, this was a couple of years ago, and we took, very simple, and we targeted some females and some males and some age demographics, and we put some studies out there, and I looked into seeing if, what was the targeting performance, and I would target a male, and I got a 50% chance of hitting a male. Well, that's good, because it's 50% of the US is male. So you've actually added zero value to what I'm trying to do. And we did the same with age, and it got worse, and it wasn't pretty. And then we took that into the consumer mentality, and we started to kind of pull back on third-party data usage in that world. And then I'm going to be brutally honest. Our bigger part of our business is commercial, and account-based marketing is a really big thing. And I'm not picking on account-based marketing. I think it's fundamental to us as a business. I think it's really, really important. But I got really tired of all these people calling me up saying, hey, look, I can target this IT decision maker, CEO at X company. And I'm thinking, no, you can't. No way. It just doesn't work in programmatic. And so we ran a study, because what else do you do? And so I've got to call out the people we worked with on it. So John Marshall actually left HP, but he was the main person, and Kumar on my team ran this with actually MIT and with the University of Melbourne, with Nico and Catherine, as we wanted to kind of really put the screws to this. And there's no way to add credibility, in my opinion, than having someone from MIT or at the University of Melbourne tell you how to do it. So we brought them in, and so what we did is we had a bit of fun. We picked six data providers. I'm not going to call them out because I'm not going to pick on them. But think the 6 biggest data providers you can think of in the commercial space, and you might guess them. We took 3 of them. We gave them account lists. We gave them ABM lists, right? So here's 15,000 accounts that we want to go after. The other 3, we just said we're going to target IT decision makers. And then we also put a control out there to look at the US Census data. And then we ran a survey. So we literally, creepily enough, asked people afterwards, do you work at this company? Do you think you work in IT? Do you even work? And we started to get the data back. And it's pretty interesting. And I'm going to show you the numbers before, and before I show it to you, we did normalize this with the US Census before. So this isn't, which actually makes it worse than it actually looks. Also, it makes it worse than maybe you think of it, because the average person who actually fills out a survey is usually unemployed. Let's just say they have more time on their hands. So we normalized it. So here's the data, the beginnings of the data. So we put that in market. 63% of the people we talked to said they were unemployed. 8% of the people said they worked in IT. 66% of them said they worked for SMB or mid-market. We were targeting enterprises. And the last one I think is just interesting. So 16% of them said they delete cookies regularly, and 32% of them said they use ad blockers. That bit on the right, I think, is an industry problem, right? We've got ad blockers out there. We've got to sort that part out, and we've got to make our advertising more relevant and more interesting and more useful and less creepy. Wedding, shoes, 2 examples. That would kind of help that part out. But those bits to the left were really kind of shocking. And so we took that data and we started playing with it a little bit more. Because if you think about, if I told you the millions of dollars we've spent on this, 63% of wastage is a lot of money that we wasted. And we started to map it. So if you look at this data now, we started to look at, made a conversion rate. I'm a media guy, and I like conversions, and conversion rates made it simple for me to get my head around. So basically, if you look at this, this is the conversion rate of people that said they worked as an IT decision maker, or they had the ability to drive a decision on IT at their company. So a 16% conversion rate basically means 16 out of 100 people said they did. And then you can see that control line across the middle. So of the 5 partners, only 2 of them were better than if we just targeted the whole world. And if we managed to target 45 to 54, that was the best. We just actually were able to use age demographic targeting. Now, I did just say that we can't do age demographic very well, but if we used age demographics to do contextual calls, we were like, yeah, this makes more sense. And so it was very, very interesting to look at this and start to say, are we actually more inefficient by using data than we are if we just targeted everybody? And then we went ahead, and I put some CPMs on that. And I shouldn't have done this, because this makes you even more depressed. And this is what it would cost us to basically target an individual if we use those different data sets. And so if you look at this, this is the effective CPM, right? So we're not paying $48 for our control group. I'm sure if you're a supplier in here and you saw $48, you're pretty excited to have a conversation with me. That is the effective CPM of on-target percentage. And you look at that at $48, and you can see the worst one there is $120 in the bottom right, which would have cost us to. So basically at this point, we made a call at HP to shut down all third-party, programmatic-based commercial media buying. I am probably the least liked guy at HP when I did this. because it obviously is a great way to say, look, we're targeting our accounts, we're targeting the IT decision maker, but I couldn't see the effectiveness in it. And yeah, it was fascinating. It was really interesting to see how different people took it, especially across our marketing organization, because we did this in-house. And the people who got behind it and tried new approaches, and then there was people on the other side that it took us nearly 9 months to run this study, because you can imagine trying to get a pretty small population to answer surveys takes some time. And it's still been about a year now since we finished up the data. It took us a while to kind of massage it and so forth. And there's still people that don't believe me. And which is okay, actually. I don't mind. But they're still fighting on if we should be back on these pieces. And so I come to this piece, and so it's not so bad, I promise. There's some other things we can do. We're still testing. I think the team just launched this week another test with a different provider. Because my thing now is anybody who calls me up who's got ABM data, I say, sure, as long as you fund me a test to run a survey, I'm happy to try it out. And so we've just launched another one. So we'll continue to test, which is not on here. But it just makes me realize that there's these kind of three. The idea of the raw data, right? Sorry, let me just jump in a slightly different direction. We took this data set, and this is where I went with raw data. We took the data set and we said, okay, so where's this going wrong, right? Is it going wrong at the raw data set? Is it going wrong when we take it online? Is it going wrong in the DSP? Where's this data going so bad? And so what we actually did is we looked at the raw data of a lot of these commercial partners and put it through a few different tests, and we actually found that the raw data sets were between 70 and 80% accurate, which I'm pretty content with. It's a lot better than 8%, right? And so we then went and ran through, and what we actually ended up uncovering, back to my conversation about the cookie at the beginning, was actually the matching from the raw data, the email address, the username, to the IP or to the cookie was where everything fell apart. And I'm not going to say if that's between the raw data to the onboarder to the DSP to the SSP to the publisher. I don't know where it is in there, but it's somewhere in there, and that's where we found the hole. And so what we've done is we've still continued to use the raw data, and we've also started to move to platforms where we can take that raw data and upload it directly, right? I'll stay commercial. LinkedIn, right? They have email addresses. We feel more confident uploading into something like that. I'm sure some people will go, oh, that doesn't sound so good. We're testing it. Always trying to learn and understand. But that's where we've kind of been playing with this raw data mentality. We also put a bunch of money back into contextual. It's been nice talking to publishers again. I'll be brutally honest. We're talking back about how do we use second-party data? How do we use publisher data, right? And that, for me, is critical. As the death of the cookie continues, and the death of the cookie that's already passed, in my opinion, because half of the browsers have already left and half of the OS is, not in percentage terms, but in number, we can get back to having relationships with those people, with those publishers and so forth. And that contextual targeting has grown massively for us. And it's just as efficient. And it's also given us a chance to do something different. I've said this a few times already in the last 24 hours. HP runs 65% of our media with banner ad. We know they don't break through. We still do it. And they do break through. That's a little harsh. That's for certain things. And we look at it, this allows us to start to think out the box and do something differently. We just did, in my opinion, a really cool execution where we went to one of our biggest APM providers in the UK, and we stuck a booth in the middle of their bank that talked about HP. I'd bet that was just as effective as us serving 3 million banner ads to the rest of the US. They're trying to target that one account, right? And so we're starting to just do things that are a bit different. We're starting to push people to take people out for dinner, right? We're starting to send people cookies. That's kind of ironic. We're trying to do things that are just a bit different than the standard display banner. And because of this data set, we've been allowed to do it, which has been really fascinating, really good fun. So these are I mean, I think some really interesting areas that has kind of opened up our door. And again, I still haven't closed the door on data. I still think first party, we're doing a ton of work with how do we use a CDP and stronger data sets, right? But I do think that we just have to continue to look at the connection points. If your data set starts great and then falls apart, that's a problem. And that's where we saw in this data set that I just showed you. It happened. But I do think this created so much opportunity for us to do other things and try different pieces again. It even has pushed us back towards linear TV, which is good fun, and connected TV and X, Y, and Z. So I kept this pretty quick because I thought you'd have a few questions, and I hope you have some questions because that's an interesting data set. And it was shocking to us and shocking to quite a lot of people we shared it with. So, but before that, I did think that I could take you through my 3 quick takeaways. One, don't wait for the cookie to die. That is what we're talking about for me internally. I think that's so critical. There is too much, like at least on our side, sitting there waiting for Google. Let's see how long they keep kicking it. But waiting for Chrome to disappear, and it's already dying. We need to be ready, and we need to be doing something different already. I have just picked apart third-party data for the last 15, 20 minutes. It's not all bad, I promise. Like there's some good stuff out there. We just got to find it, and so keep questioning, keep looking at data, and keep playing with it. And then the last one, and I just talked about this, and I've put in, it's getting to think outside of the box a little bit more, right? Starting to be able to play with different mediums. And this one, for me, is so exciting, too, because just a quick story. My CMO sent me an email on the 24th of December. I love getting emails on the 24th of December, as we're all heading out for our winter break, saying, Freddie, next year, can you be more innovative? What does that mean, right? Does that mean, because I can tell you about some great innovation we just did in SPO, or I can tell you that we did some great innovation in our bid optimization algorithms, or I could buy a New York Times billboard. Oh, sorry, not New York Times, Times Square billboard. Is that innovation? So I didn't really have the answer. But what this data set has allowed me to do is think outside the box and allowed the team to start pushing a bit more from different mediums, which to me is innovation and good fun. And I think that also connects to, I don't know if a lot of you follow Forrester, and every time I read it, I get depressed about how much people hate advertising. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us to start to think again outside the box and push as we can still continue to utilize data, but then do more. So those are the 3. I am, again, I whizzed through this pretty quickly. I'm happy to go back and show you those numbers again if you want to stare at them and get depressed with me. But otherwise, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them and kind of walk through them.
Freddie, thank you so much. That was a deliberately provocative opening. Thank you. It's exactly what I wanted. If you have questions throughout the next 3 days, please stand and tell us who you are and who you're with so we get to know you. Questions for Freddie?
Oh. Hello. Hey, my name is Alberto Aceves. I'm with Unruly. We're an SSP. I'm very, very happy that you did this test. I was agency side, and we ran a similar test and saw very similar results. We did find a few data groups that we had faith in, but there was others that we made a decision to stop using. In fact, we even got some pushback from I think it might have been Servata, when they found out that we were using their the brand lift studies in this way. I don't think they were too happy that we were doing that. But when you found out that, I believe you said about 60% of the respondents were unemployed, was there any way to know if they were actually formally employed in those fields that you were targeting?
It's a really good question. No, it's a short answer. We took it at that point in time. So yes, historical, like, could that person been employed up until the week before yes, they could have been. We took it at the point of time, and it, I guess, speaks a bit to recency, right, of the data set and how fast can it be, how often is it being refreshed. And in the B2B space, as I've dug in, is not as often as possibly is needed for us. Especially over the last few years with people jumping around left, right, and center for new companies, right? We're still struggling to keep the data set accurate. So it's a really good point. No, it wasn't in this data set. I guess there was, I think we limited to about 15 questions, the survey. I think if we kept going, we would have probably asked something like that. But we might have gotten a bit creepy, right, if we went any further. So that's kind of where we stopped.
And lastly, did you share the results with the specific data providers and give them a chance for a rebuttal?
Yes, we did. And it was interesting. I'm actually going to speak a little bit about the demographic stuff we did earlier. This is a really interesting question. Because you get, like, I put data providers in two groups. The ones went, yeah, that's what we thought. And then you kind of look at them going, oh, okay, it's not what you sold us. And then you get the other group, which is, oh no, your data's completely wrong. How can that not be true? Let me test it and let me measure it. Well, hold on a second. If you're going to test and you're going to measure it, well, of course it's going to look good. So yeah, we did ask, and it's been very interesting. And then some of these parts, it's been interesting to see how different partners have responded to. Some are still fighting with us, saying, hey, look, we should be back on these plans. We've got the data set, it's right, which I appreciate. And then some people haven't never called me back again since that conversation, which is also fine. We'll move on. No worries.
Hi, I'm Jake. I'm on the agency side at Essence MediaCom. Two things. Well, number one, I guess this is the macro question. The first question is actually easier to answer, I think. But doesn't the survey itself also require cookies and then a match back in order to do the survey?
Really good question. So we did it on a panel basis. So no. So we got around it.
You knew the cohort before
Yes.
you actually reached out to them. All right.
Because that was actually, when we first put the study together, we did chuckle about that because we actually were going to do it based on cookies. And that was like, that's really silly.
Sometimes it's just self-fulfilling. We
Yes.
use the same thing to measure the same thing.
Yeah.
And then the other part is, so it sounds very much like if the data is accurate, I mean, first party, second party, third party, if the data, and I know that every data source is different, but as good as the data source can be, if it is accurate, then, and if the problem is the infrastructure and the pipes and all the layers it has to go through, where does that leave us? I mean, are there tests that you're doing now to identify the substructures of the pipes that are then now, I can't even ideate on how you would set that test infrastructure, so I would love to hear.
Exactly, that's what it opened up. You're spot on, right? So does retargeting work, right? That's all based on a cookie. Should we even be using audience data from a Google, for example, not to pick on them, I don't know if they're in the room. Because, yeah, it's all cookie based. We are, to your point, I haven't worked out how to do the study either, right? I don't know where you go down the path to start to find the gap. I will not talk about the onboarder that we use. We did do some testing with the onboarding partners. We did find some pretty big holes in there, where we took the raw data, uploaded it through, and saw the discrepancy drop at the onboarding stage and the matching. So that was one thing we have done. And I look at that too, and I kind of actually go, we should have realized this like 5 years ago. Because when you load 1,000 people into an onboarding platform and suddenly you've got 30 million cookies, you should kind of question that, right? Like, where did because not every single person, I'm trying to do my maths really quickly in my head there, doesn't have 3,000 devices or 3,000 cookies on them, right? So that part we have tested. The step into retargeting or DSP to SSP to publisher connection, we have not. I don't know if I can say I'm a wimp. Maybe I am. I'm kind of scared to find out, because if I shut that part down, then do we have no programmatic media? So I don't know if I'm going to go that far yet. But yeah, it is a problem. Yeah, it's a good question.
Freddie, are you using clean rooms with your publishers? Are you finding them at all effective, cost-effective, effective in terms of impact?
We are using clean rooms. We have started to do some testing with them. I will be really honest, the bit we've struggled with is HP, and this would be interesting. So HP actually in-housed all of our digital media. And what we've struggled with a lot of the clean room technology is that we have to go broker all the relationships. And I don't have 20 people sitting there ready to go broker them. And so we just haven't been able to pull it off.
It just brings you back to the pre-programmatic days where you're back to having to deal with a relentless wave of publishers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, but it is it is a solution that we've looked at.
How are you using, because we had talked about this in the prep, I wanted you to address it. You're using media mix modeling and multi-touch attribution in part to solve for some of this. Could you bring us into the measurement piece to this now and where you are?
Sure, yeah, no, sorry. And when you did the prelude, I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about multi-mix, MTAs and media mix. So we are, well, obviously multi-touch attribution is in trouble if you believe this data, right? Because a lot of it's based on cookies. And so we're spending a lot of time looking at, and this is a short-term solution, using IP address to do multi-touch attribution right now. And I say short-term because I'm just waiting for the regulatory bodies to start to work that one out and start to block that one down, right? We're just playing the game on trying to stay one step in front of the government, which is probably not a good approach. So we're starting to use MTAs to do that. We're moving away to the IP address. We're moving to click-based models. Don't shoot me, I don't like that idea either, but that is kind of where we're getting put and we're getting boxed into. So that's one area we're doing, and actually I shouldn't say just click-based, because if we can capture the IP, we will, and we can use that for view-through too. So that's what we're doing on MTA, which again, but to link it back to here, what we were doing a lot of was we were using cookie-based data to understand ABM journeys, right? So did this account show up to our website? Did this account then move its way through? And did they convert, right? Did they turn into pipeline? Did they turn into revenue X, Y, and Z? All of that got shut down. We shut all of that down because of this data set. And so now I guess I'll be transparent and say we have no idea, right? We just don't know if they're going to convert or not until they show up in our pipeline. And then we try and connect it back that way. So then that connects me to the media mix and to the marketing mix model, because that is now what we're focused on, right? That is the solution we're going back. I don't want to say going back to, because it was always in the background, but that is what we're going to hang our media on, and our investment decisions over the next few years is how does our media mix need to look. We're going to focus on that modeling approach because it is the data set that we feel is going to be the most accurate and comprehensive moving forward. So
It's like everything old is new again.
it is like everything is old and new. Hopefully old and improved. But yeah, it is like old is new.
I want to drill into one of your points when you said you are still working with third-party data and third-party vendors, but you're scrutinizing it more. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've learned about what questions do you need to ask these vendors in the data pipeline in order to surface whether it's reliable?
Right, well, yeah. So we use a lot of we use third-party data to enrich our own CRM. So we're lucky enough at HP, we have an amazing CRM database. I won't tell you what we know about your printer and your PCs if you have HP devices, but we know quite a bit about what you're doing. And we want to enrich that with information. And so we use third-party data providers to do that. And we just test them. We do really basic things. And we have it's a bit more sophisticated than this, but I'm going to make it, like, we'll look up Freddie, Liversidge in their database and see what they say about me. And see how accurate it is. And again, it's more sophisticated. We don't do it on one person. We do it on like 300 people and then look at it. And we also then look very much on where that data is coming from and refined. Because what we've found is we want to get to that source of the data, right? We don't want to talk to individuals that are doing a lot of cookie-based modeling to kind of create audiences on a third-party cookie. I should be fair there, where I think that's getting harder. So that's kind of, I guess, what we've done as an approach. We have actually we have an actual documentation that we actually go through for each individual provider on how we will then evaluate their performance. So that's kind of it at the very top nutshell, if that's okay, without giving you guys all the exact details of exactly what we share, so you can all, any data provider in here can kind of work out how to beat our system and get chosen.
Freddie's going to be leading a roundtable at the end of the morning, so you can drill in deeper then. Freddie, that was a great opening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.